You for being here today. I wish to congratulate President Irfanali. Today he will be receiving the Wilson Center Award for Outstanding Public Service. And this will be done in Miami. I guess I should start with giving you a brief update on the distribution of the cash grant. The activity started in earnest, and the Ministry of Finance, which is tasked with its implementation, has rolled this program out across several regions. The target regions at this point in time are regions 1, 7, 8, and 9, the hinterland regions, and region 4. We will confine our activities to these 5 regions for the next month, and then move on to the other regions. So I just want to say to people from the other regions that you will be registered, but it will be after we've completed the registration exercise in these 4 regions. You will receive the cash grant. It's just a matter of time. And so please be patient, because it is a complex task involving the enumeration or the registration of several hundreds of thousands of Guyanese. Now, there have been some challenges given the magnitude of the task before us, and the Ministry of Finance has set up a mechanism to ensure that people can give a feedback as to the process, and hopefully they can improve the process of registration of people. Like in some centers, maybe if the enumerators go a little bit late, the lines gather up, people have to get to work, and in other places they've had some difficulties to they're trying to smooth this out as quickly as possible, and we are keeping a watchful eye over this all. They have substantially completed the registration exercise in Region 9 and already started distributing checks there. They have substantially completed the exercise in Region 1 and Region 8. The schedule for Region 7 will be announced shortly, and the schedule for Region 4, East Coast, East Bank, and Georgetown are all out at this point in time. So we expect that this exercise will be completed in these 4 regions in the course of the next 4 weeks, and the checks for these 5 regions would all be cut, if not distributed immediately, but we're making a big effort to have them in people's hands too. I want to ask people to have some patience again with this exercise. We will not have to do this. We would not have to do this again in the future, when I'm sure in the future there will be additional cash grants. This is the registration exercise now that people are going through would allow us to have a proper database, so the next round it will be easier for that to happen whenever it comes in future years. So please get registered and exercise a bit of patience. For all of those who've been trying to run down the exercise, and these are mainly people from the opposition. I see in Region 9, Carl Parker, the old new REO. He has something to say about the exercise, and you would see them. They stand out like a sore thumb. I would say that we'll just have to ignore them and persevere to ensure that people get their resources. And they're all very negative about this, the entire opposition, because they don't want it to succeed. They would like to see problems arising from the distribution, the registration and distribution exercise, so that they'd have something to talk about. They can't match the initiative, so they want to run it down. And we will not allow them to succeed. I've been also getting calls from individuals about the pension book distribution, and so there were some initial errors in the places where pensioners should collect their pension books from. I spoke with the minister, and these are being corrected so that the pensioners will be able to collect their books once the books are available, as I explained at an earlier press conference about how the security features we're putting into the new pension books. Once those are available, then they would be distributed in a manner that would be accommodative to the pensioners to see that they get the books as closest as possible to where they live. The ministry, as far as possible, is using like religious institutions, the churches, mosques, temples, places where people frequent, so that the pensioners can also receive their books in their communities. These were two things that have been raised with me during the course of the week. There have been some concerns, and people call me on this. For example, when the schedule came out earlier in the week and had on the East Coast, from Enterprise to King Grove, all the communities there being registered, but those from Enterprise to Commons Lodge on the East Coast, the schedule was not out. The pensioners and the people from Better Hope and Good Hope were inundating us with phone calls saying, where do we have to go to Enterprise to register? That has since been corrected, and the schedule for the entire Region 4 is out now. So people can see when they will be in your community. So please pay attention to the schedule. I know people are concerned about their ability to get registered, so I want them to understand that the government is taking their concerns seriously, but it is a huge undertaking. It's a large number of people, and it will take time. So for example, if you're in Region 1 or Region 9 and you did not have an opportunity to be registered when the team was there, would you still be able to get your money? The answer is yes. That's why I said substantially completed. So if we've completed, say, 95 or 96% of the persons in a region that are registered, and we get the checks in their hands, then the 5% remaining, 4 or 5% remaining, we can, at a later point in time, set up a mechanism for people to be registered, and they too will receive their checks. So I want people to understand, even if they miss the registration exercise that's taking place within a defined time period in their communities, they're not going to miss out on the resources. This happened the first time we did the household cash grant a bit, that some households missed out on it because they were not there to collect the money at the time when people were distributing it. The first 25,000, that was in the period when we had COVID. So, so I want to assure those individuals too that they will not be able. Let me say again, for people who are overseas, they're asking me if they can go to the consulate to register, and the answer is no. That whether we'll be having a desk in Queens and Brooklyn and Toronto to get them registered, and the answer is no. We made it clear that if you have to register in Guyana and collect your check in Guyana. We're not, whilst people living abroad, Guyanese living abroad are eligible, we are not going to be conducting registration exercises abroad. That they have to be done right here in Guyana. And they have to present themselves physically to do that. They can't come with authorization to give someone else to collect the money on their behalf. So that was the compromise variant, because there were concerns that the system could be abused. And we decided that to ensure that people are eligible, but they would have to do so, they'd have to come home physically and get the resources done. That could change in future years, but as of this moment in time, that's the position. So for those who've been calling me and sending a lot of WhatsApp messages to me, that's the position at this point in time. You'd recall the opposition was saying nobody living abroad should be eligible. We said, fine, you're eligible, but you have to come home and get this done. Now this week I want to be a bit more political than usual, because I think it warrants it. We've had quite a week of audacious demonization of GECOM, all with the intent to destroy the credibility of GECOM in a very unfair manner, patently unfair manner, by a number of fringe organizations and political parties, all with the aim and I think the motive, that should they be able to, or should they succeed in destroying the credibility of GECOM, they may be able to cast doubts on any election conducted by GECOM. And so it is orchestrated. It is orchestrated, and several of these organizations that exist on paper that don't have membership, if you add all of their membership up together, they can fill a room. But they're boldly making statements and putting out press releases, and getting a lot of these press releases represented in the newspapers and in mainstream media. And I think the primary target of the abuse, I would almost call it abuse, is the chair of GECOM. They're hoping to destroy her credibility. Now, had the chair of GECOM not stood up in 2020, APNU would have succeeded in stealing the elections. And I think they are bitter about that, because several times they were urging the chair of GECOM to break the law, to go against the Constitution of Guyana, to ignore decisions of the court, including the highest court, the CCJ. And she stood on the side of law and order and on the side of the popular, the electorate of the country. GECOM, with a massive attempt by the staff of GECOM, led by Lowenfield and others, when they tried to steal elections from within in favor of APNU, it was the commission, particularly the chair of the commission and others, who stood up against that attempt to steal the elections. So if there is anyone who is credible, or any organization or leadership that is credible, it is the commission, not the secretariat. And that is why, to ensure to restore credibility to that the secretariat, some of the people had to be replaced by professionals. And that is what has happened here. But APNU is smarting from, they're very upset because their internal riggers, the people who rigged on their behalf, were removed from the secretariat, from the staff, and they don't have a compliant chairperson like they were hoping to have under Patterson when he was illegally appointed here. So that is what is playing out at this point in time in GECOM. And you have the TUC and all of the others weighing in on this process. But I'll come to that a little bit later. So I want to deal with that GECOM matter extensively. And then I want to address some other issues about double standards. So let me use the most recent example of this. The Press Association of Guyana has always spoken, or in its occasional public commentary, have always unfairly targeted the government or the PPP as trying to bully reporters when you have, and they even magnify innocuous situations into their perceived attempts at bullying reporters. This never happens. They ignore the opposition overt bullying of reporters, and criticize the PPP for perceived bullying of reporters. They complain that the government doesn't give enough access to media. They complain that we don't answer questions from the media, all unfairly. So last week, not last week, I think it might have been earlier, yes, it might be last week, from my last press conference, I was struck by an incident that took place. So the AFC, which is now a party very small in numbers, but it's not a new party. It's been around for a long time, 15 odd years. and it represents that it is open, transparent, it has cutting-edge policies, it's competent, it's not corrupt, all of which are false, and that it's open to the media. Has over the past several weeks now been conducting their press conferences on Zoom, so they control who can get into the Zoom links, and they can cut you off if they're not very happy with what you're saying. So at last week's press conference, one of the reporters, I'm not sure which reporter, was trying to ask the AFC about their position when in 2020, which was made public by Patterson, that Mingo's figures match the SOPs that they had. That was last week. So the reporter was trying to ask this question. In 2020, you said Mingo's figures match your SOPs. Patterson said that. And you said you may be able, would be willing to make available the SOPs. So one would wonder now, why didn't you make those SOPs available? So clearly we know that was a blatant lie, because Mingo fingers did not match any SOPs. So Patterson lied to the nation when he said that. It was he was central to the narrative that was attempting to rig the elections. They were central to this. So AFC did not have a peripheral role. You don't need Nigel Hughes to study. He said they want to study whether the AFC had a role in attempting to rig the last elections. Here you have evidence of it in the presence of the person who was sitting next to him at the press conference. So this is what was shocking to me is this, and I've not seen the Press Association at this time say anything about it. So I'm looking to play this.
Please go ahead. I'm sorry. I really want you to pose questions that are topical to the issues that we're discussing today. I'm not prepared to entertain questions that go back 4 and 5 years.
So just imagine Cathy Hughes in the presence of Nigel Hughes, who was moderating the press conference. Her husband is the leader of the party, saying, sorry, you need to pose questions only that are topical, whatever they determine to be topical. They're not prepared to entertain any questions that go back 4 or 5 years. Imagine a serious political party saying in the presence of Nigel Hughes, now he did not say, hold on a minute, Cathy Hughes, that's wrong. We are prepared to answer questions from our entire history. Like I do about the PPP, if you ask me a question from the 1950s when the party was formed, I'll take your question. I'll give you an answer. They're not prepared to entertain any question. This is the official position of a party. You are 3 of the leaders of the party there. In fact, 4. Nigel Hughes, Ramjatan, Patterson, Cathy Hughes, I don't know if there are some others, saying we're not prepared to take questions from the past. from 4 or 5 years ago. So you have to start now. Forget our track record. You must take questions only from the contemporary era. So that means, just imagine Kaichor News come to ask me about the 2016 agreement that the AFC signed with ExxonMobil. And I say, hold on a minute. That's 10 years ago or 8 years ago. I'm not prepared to take questions from 4 years ago or beyond 4 years ago. Just imagine what the Press Association will say about the PPP. Just imagine that, oh, they don't want to take any questions about their record or anything of the sort. But silence from the Press Association. And this is a serious political party. This, or what you may want to think is a serious political party. How could you take a political party like this seriously? Where the entire leadership of a party at a press conference on Zoom, they don't do press conferences live, on Zoom, a Zoom press conference saying, no, we will tell you what you can ask at the press conferences. And we're not going to take questions from the past. That happened this week. You wouldn't think that it would happen anywhere in the world. So Nigel Hughes does not have to answer about his role in the negotiations of the agreement with the 2016 agreement when he worked for Exxon and Trotman was on the other side of the table negotiating with Exxon, because that's from the past. They don't have to answer about Cathy Hughes awarding contracts to herself in her own ministry, to her own company, because that's from the past. They don't have to answer questions about their betrayal of the Guyanese people, all the lies they told them in the 2015 period, because that's from the past. If you ask Nigel Hughes about how much money he has received from 2016 to now from ExxonMobil, he wouldn't answer, because that's from the past. So he's unprepared to answer anything from the past. Cathy Hughes said that at their press conference. They're unprepared to do that. But he doesn't even want to answer from the present. He doesn't even want to answer the questions about his conflict of interest. So they're not going to answer from the present nor the past. And they hope that we will take them. You know, the people of this country would miraculously take them by some stroke of fate, give them the reins of power again. If they can't be accountable now, how would they be accountable if they have political power? And it's a kind of arrogance that they had when they had political power. They brought it back out into the opposition. But it sticks out as like a sore thumb, as I spoke of before. So this is, it's almost like living in a dystopia. These don't happen in normally functioning societies. A political party will tell you from which era they will answer questions. It doesn't happen. Another feature of the dystopia that we live in, that's why this week I want to look at it politically, is a Damar Waves article. PNCR will accept election victory with bad voters list. So this is what it says, the opening paragraph. the People's National Congress reform will accept an election victory in next year's general and regional elections, even if Guyana goes to the poll with a voters list that the party insists lacks credibility, but would not accept the result if it loses. Executive Member Ganesh Mahipal. So, for that to sink in, we will go to the elections with this list. If we win, we'll accept the results. But if we lose, we're not going to accept the results. This is coming from the People's National Congress. He speaks for the People's National Congress. Where in the world would you have this, like this remarkable stupidity being passed off as policy or a party's position? It's remarkably stupid. And you have to have a disdain for the people of this country, the normally thinking people of this country, to make such a statement. Okay, we will accept it, the results, if we win, but we will not if we lose. It's remarkably, unbelievably stupid. And this happens when you farm out the leadership of a major political party to people who don't have any policy-making experience. And what I want to, I don't want it to sound arrogant, but it's the fact. Just imagine the people of Guyana putting their futures in the hands of the People's National Congress at the elections. Guess who the front runners at their press conferences are? The people who make policy for them. So we already accepted that Norton doesn't have any major experience at a management level. He was always a junior functionary of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. But the three persons that go to these press conferences for APNU, Mahipal was the Community Development Officer in Region 3 in 2020. Elson Lowe was a research assistant at SARA. And Sherwin Holder was working for a local businessman in 2020. These are the three people you will put their future, the future policy making, and your children's future in their hands. These are their front runners at the press conferences. You need some experience to tackle the complex tasks of government. We can't take chances with people who have not even run a basic, had no management experience. Look by contrast. Irfan Ali became a member of parliament in 2006. In 2009, he became a minister. He had 6 years in the cabinet up to 2015, and then he was the opposition spokesperson on finance when I was leader of the opposition, before he became president. When I ran, I had almost 6 years in the cabinet before too. as finance minister. A long period before I became president. The Ashni Singh has had many years at finance. Edge Hill experience. Mark Phillips headed the army. Now he brought that management experience to the position as prime minister. The Anil Nandalal, prominent lawyer on his own. I can go down the long list. Onesh was a magistrate before. If you name the people on our side, Minister Indar came, he was chairman of the Private Sector Commission and successfully had businesses that ran. I can go down the list of almost every single cabinet member, and you will see the experience that people have had. You look at the other side. You have at these press conferences now 3 persons who were like not even research assistant at SARA. That was Elson Lowe. And a community development officer, not even for the country, for Region 3. That was my Paul. And the other one was working in a junior capacity with a businessman. These are the people you're going to hand the future of our country to and policy making. They have, so they can talk a lot of nonsense every week. They go and they just make policy on the run. Oh, we'll do this, we wouldn't do that, etc. They don't have a clue about doing anything because they've never done anything before. And you think we can gamble with the future of our country? And so, look at Anog too. It's the same thing with Anog. Anog recently had a leadership change, and almost all their members became members of their executive now. Mark France, you think you could put anything, find out in 2020 what experience he has? Nothing, absolute nothing there. Absolute, zero. This is what we are contesting against. And so I'll talk a bit more about them, but clearly people have to pay attention to these variables, because you can't entrust the future of our country when there are complex undertaking now for the years ahead to the neophytes who will say anything. For them, it's all a game. So let me go through again these political parties that we are contesting against. David Hines lashes out at reporter when they question WPA's membership. So people just ask, how many members you have? And they're upset because they don't have any membership. But every week they have 30 press statements and 5 TV programs and 15 programs on social media. And it all about and a series of lies intended, 1, to undermine GECOM, and 2, to push racism in the country. But no membership. So that's one of the parties contesting. We have, as I said before, Anog. Anog recently threatened basically not threatened, went after GECOM. How GECOM, this is what they said in the Starbroek News article. Anog's contention is that based on the interpretation by Dr. De Silva, this is about the seat, the joinder seat that was issued. the LJP party should have enjoyed the full term by getting the most votes in the combination of lists. Instead, GECOM and or their apparatus, by willful negligence, oversight, or blatant disregard for established protocol, allow Dr. Asher Kisoon, a representative of a party TNM other than the JLP, to illegally enter and occupy and now squat in Parliament. So they're blaming GECOM. You recall that this same ANOG had already selected their member to go into Parliament to replace Asher Kisoon. They didn't say a word. They selected the same France, and then they threw him out and selected someone else. I don't know for what reason, mediocrity or whatever reason they threw him out. But they were busy, willing to participate in what they now term an illegality, and blaming GECOM for this. Now they have all the legal luminaries in the world. You had Timothy Jonas there. Why didn't he say, you know, the seat allocation shouldn't have gone, can't be shared this way? It should have gone to Schuman alone. Schuman should have had the seat for the entire term. And I think Schuman wanted to stay on. And they were insisting that he should resign too. Now, ANOG is blaming GECOM and talking about launches a scathing attack on GECOM and cites failure to uphold mandate. This is opportunism at its worst. But they suddenly emerged out of their stupor and weighed in on this GECOM issue. It's a side issue, by the way, that Nigel Hughes threatens to boycott elections over GECOM wrong seat allocation. Well, the seat allocation by GECOM, whether it's wrong or not, could be adjudicated in court. But it didn't change the outcome of the elections. It doesn't change anything in Parliament, the majority. The PPP still has the majority of seats in Parliament. And they were all going along with this. Suddenly, now AFC threatens to boycott the elections because GECOM made a seat allocation error according to Nigel Hughes. But they're using this now to undermine GECOM, consistent with what I said right at the beginning of the press conference. But I think Nigel Hughes may want to boycott the elections for other reasons, because they're scared about the outcome, using this as an excuse again. And then the TUC weighed in on the same matter. So these are over the next few weeks, months, we're going to see this happening all week long. With a new media cycle, the news cycle being dominated by statements coming from defunct or near useless parties that have no membership whatsoever or limited membership. But by the sheer weight of their press releases, hundreds of them will come out. You would think there is a groundswell of public opinion which subscribe to their views. And the opposite is the truth. The opposite is the truth. That the majority of the people of this country overwhelmingly don't pay any heed to their statements, nor do they subscribe to that view. They recognize what is at stake here. Another party that is coming soon is this Glen Lyle party. This is what they're sending out as membership card now. And I see a healthy dose of crooks linked to this party, a massively healthy dose. In fact, unhealthy dose of crooks. I shouldn't say healthy dose of crooks. They're all, particularly one who is from abroad. But we'll come back later to him when he launches his party. He's already announced his intention. We'll come back. But you will see that too. The same stuff over and over again. Let me go on and speak about another matter which says to you that you cannot believe. I've already dealt with the People's National Congress and their press conferences. So you can't believe what they say. And then AFC, apart from hiding from their past, they also lie in a very, very shameless manner. So last week, after I spoke about the Exim Bank approval, the Starbroek News, in a manner that doesn't even challenge them, issued Patterson challenges Jagdeo's claim on U.S. Exim Bank loan. The Kaichor News does this gleefully. U.S. Exim Bank yet to approve loan request to gas to energy project David Patterson. So this is what Patterson said. They put a big picture of Patterson here in the story, as though the picture would be an indicator of the veracity of what he is saying. So this is what he said at their press conference, the one that he didn't want to answer the question from the past. He was prepared to answer a contemporary question. At an AFC press conference yesterday, Patterson cited information from an unnamed source who has been in contact with the Exim Bank for over a year. According to his source, no approval was given by the Exim Bank at their last meeting in November. Patterson further noted that the Exim Bank will meet next on January 9, 2025, and if the loan comes up for discussion, only then can a final decision be made, after which it is then sent to Congress for approval. And he went on to speculate that this is not going to happen till the end of next year, etc., through this unnamed source from Exim Bank that they've been in contact with for a year. Now, this must have been Rickford Burke, this unnamed source, who if anything, he has to do with Exim Bank, they should really, because he should have nothing to do with Exim Bank. He'd clean out every cent that they have there. I'll come to him a little bit later. But I don't know, when they cited an unnamed source, and the guy reads this out at the press conference, and then the two major papers never sought to confirm from Exim Bank whether what I was saying is true or not. So it was the Demerara Waves that says, U.S. Exim Bank confirms approval of loan for Guyana's gas to energy project. They could have easily done what the Demerara Waves did. The Demerara Waves confirmed it and said, yes, it has been approved, and it has now gone to Congress. At the November meeting, that it was approved at that meeting, that Patterson said his source told him that they've been cultivating for a whole year, and he read from it. I don't know what he was looking at, there, or if Ramjatan passed him the info. But the thing is that it was a lie. At a press conference, he went and lied blatantly and read from a document the lie on a matter that could easily be confirmed. And then Ramjatan had to weigh in to say Jagdeo is always lying, you know, so I believe Pato. Of course they would believe each other. So this is how it is. Just last week, imagine, how can you take a party like this seriously? It's one blunder after another blunder. This is the same person who is charged now for corruption in quite a few cases. So it just shows how easily the lie comes to them. Easily. They don't believe that they have to be accountable to anyone. And now they're finding it, they can't, through arrogance and aloofness, basically hide from scrutiny. They can't, through arrogance and aloofness, hide from scrutiny. Because now, on a weekly basis, it's not easy when you have to come back every week and remain consistent for long periods. It takes consistency and being truthful to do that. If you're not truthful, then you can come to 2 or 3 press conferences and get away with it. You can't do many because the lies will catch up with you. And their lies keep catching up with them all the time. And there are a series of lies that they have told. So this is something that I'm looking forward with. Rickford Burke has been going crazy because from what I gather, his antics, his criminal antics recently, is because I think he's under investigation in the United States itself. And it could land him in jail before he even comes back to Guyana to face his criminal charges. Could end up in jail in the US because he's been lobbying he's been lobbying several US government officials on behalf of the opposition in Guyana without registering on the FARA. That's illegal. It has jail term attached to it. And I gather he and his organization they're being investigated for extortion too, and criminal activities, collecting money for false purposes in the United States of America, similar to what he's charged for in Guyana. So there is no conspiracy to assassinate Rickford Burke. It's all a figment of his imagination. Nobody wants to assassinate Rickford Burke. Burke is a criminal, and, you know, eventually his misdeeds will catch up with him. You can extort people, you can be a conman for a while, and then eventually the law will catch up with you. And he doesn't even need to come to Guyana to face the consequences of the law. It will happen in the United States of America. And I think now he's worried that there is no sympathetic public official for him to go to. I think he's worried about the incoming Trump administration, that they will look into all of his illegal affairs. So I see him going today. I think he posted today that I'm a racist pig. And every day it's something, I'm part of some plot to assassinate Rickford Burke. You think I got time to waste on Burke? And I heard his vehicle broke down. I told you the last time my vehicle broke down in at a function that he went to recently. There is a research company, I saw that we had to issue a statement on. I want to say to people, some project development consultancy that I spoke with several people, and the enumerators gave the distinct impression that they were doing this survey on behalf of the government of Guyana. Now, this is a free country. People are prepared, can do whatever survey they want or they wish, but they must not misrepresent on whose behalf they're doing this survey. And so it would be interesting for the company to be transparent on as to whose behalf it's doing this survey on. But people, I want to say to people across the country, they're under no obligation to share any information with any survey or that any person who is doing a survey with. They're under no obligation to share any information with them. And it's very suspicious too, because they ask people like, which political party? I spoke with about 4 persons. Which political party you support and all of that sort of stuff. Those are people's private business. You know, so a lot of the people I talked to said we gave them fake info. But I just want people to understand, a lot of people thought the timing of it too is unusual, because it comes out at the same time when we're registering people for the cash grant. So a lot of people thought that maybe this is when people in the enumerator shows up, that this is being done on behalf of the government and has some connection with the cash grant. It has nothing to do with the cash grant. Absolutely nothing to do with the cash grant. There's a story on this issue in News Source where the National Security Advisor said that the president will decide on release of GDF helicopter crash report. And I spoke with President Ali. He said to me the matter has not even gone to the Defense Board as yet, and he has not indicated to anyone that he is the person to release or to give the final decision on the release of this report. This report was done by the Civil Aviation Authority. It has a military component. It's done in relation to a military accident. However, the Civil Aviation Authority falls under a civilian minister. And therefore, I suspect that once the Defense Board discusses the matter, then the report will be released by the civilian minister who is responsible for Civil Aviation Authority. So it tends to be a bit misleading. I'm going to end here today. I didn't deal with many government issues today. Another week I'll deal with those. I just wanted to talk a bit about the opposition. Thank you.
Mr. Jagdeo, Dennis Shiralda Marawi. Sir, in relation to the cash grants, can you say what will be done to register shuttles? That is such as the elderly and the disabled, as well as people working at established mining operations like Aurora, where they are basically confined to the location. That's one question. And can you say what will be the inflationary impact of the cash grants, and how does government intend to reduce that inflationary impact, if there will be any? And Thirdly, why doesn't the government itemize what exactly the monies from the Natural Resources Fund will be used for, so that Guyanese will see exactly how the funds are being spent in a very specific manner? And based on the explanation by GECOM's legal advisor that
just let me go through Shatin's inflationary itemized.
Right. Shuttles and elderly?
Yes, Shatin's itemized. Yeah, the last one.
Right. Based on the explanations by the GECOM legal advisor that the Liberty and Justice Party should continue to occupy the seat, do you believe that Ms. Asha Kasoon should be replaced?
So let me start with the last one first. This is a matter entirely for GECOM and the Parliament office. The political parties have no standing in this matter. So if, for example, the GECOM's legal officer has this opinion, and this is discussed at the commission itself, and the commission agrees with his position, GECOM then has to decide, having given the advice, they have to now seek legal advice on whether once a member of the National Assembly has been extracted from a list and appointed as a member of the National Assembly, they have now, GECOM has the authority to remove that member, consistent with the Constitution and the laws of Guyana. So they have to then decide whether they can then remove the member. They have the jurisdiction and the authority to. If they decide that's the case, that yes, they do, then they would have to deal with that matter or address that matter to the Speaker, citing the relevant sections of the law. Should they decide that we cannot or we do not have any role in the removal of a member, the law doesn't give us that mandate once that member has been appointed to the National Assembly, then the matter would then fall to the Speaker. Does the Speaker have the authority to do so? And if the Speaker doesn't have the authority, then maybe it would have to be done through an elections petition. So all of these matters have to go through a course of action. They have to be studied carefully. They have to seek legal advice. The relevant agencies, not the political parties, need to deliberate on these matters, come up with final decisions on all of the things that I mentioned, looking at all of the variables, and then make a definitive position. But not to be bullied by the AFC or by ANOG that is so duplicitous that it's slimy. Now saying, we told you so, and they were busy preparing to get in there to Parliament, and now blaming GECOM all for the fiasco. It's not an emotional issue for me. It's a matter of law and the Constitution. It's not an emotional matter. And so all of these would love to make it a referendum on GECOM, because then it serves their political purpose, as I explained right at the beginning of my press conference. So that is how I would approach the matter, in a logical way. And I don't think there's a role for the People's Progressive Party in this matter. We're not the guardians of the laws relating to elections of members to the National Assembly, their extraction from the list, and their appointment in the Parliament. The guardian for all of this is the Parliament of Guyana and GECOM. Those two agencies are the guardians and the implementing agencies for those activities. So,
Gary, before you go on, is the PPP and yourself comfortable with Ms. Kassoul being in Parliament?
no, but I am at this point in time, it has nothing to
Legal
do with
aspect.
no. It has nothing to do with my discomfort or comfort. There are the laws of the country, and there is the Constitution of Guyana. It has nothing, that's precisely what I was trying to say. That it has nothing, this is not an emotional issue. It's not what Jagdeo wants, or Nigel Hughes wants, or Norton wants, or Anog wants. If we were running a country based on what political parties want, then we might as well throw away the Constitution of Guyana and the laws of Guyana. There are laws and there is the Constitution, and these guide the deliberations of GECOM, and they guide the appointment of members to the National Assembly, and who is eligible and who is not eligible. And I'm saying that this must be studied carefully and fairly applied. And if it's fairly applied and they decide ultimately that the person there is not there or should not have been there, then what should be the remedy? They should identify the remedy. And then if it is decided after careful examination of the law that a person has a right to be there, then that's the end of the matter. But it's not based on what, this is not governed by opinions of anyone. Like Jagdeo opinion, I would be premature to even to prefer a view if before this process has been gone through. And that's how countries have to operate. Imagine they try to steal elections, AFC, try to steal elections, and now they're upset with this, and they want the chair of GECOM to act in accordance with their wishes. She has to act in accordance with the laws of the country and with the Constitution of Guyana, not based on what political parties want. That process has to be completed. That's what I'm saying. The NRF is governed by a separate piece of legislation, and the funds remaining in the NRF have to be invested in a manner prescribed by the law. And so the law is very specific as to what instruments you can invest the funds in the NRF in. We have removed further from the NRF any direct charge on funds from that would remain in the NRF. So there is we've removed the fiscal element out of the NRF, or well, basically the fiscal element. So if you have $100 in the NRF, that money can't be spent for anything else except investments and savings for the future. Under APNU, you could have spent it on other things. Now, we have a formula where once applied, X sum comes out from the NRF into the budget. And I suspect that is what you're talking about. So the NRF is very clear and its investment is itemized. So let's get that clear. Now, this comes in as revenue into the coffers of the country or to the budget. It's less than 30% of the overall budget. It's less than 30%. 40% of the budget or so, over nearly 40% of the budget is revenue from other sources, non-oil sources. Should we start balkanizing that too? To say if we collect $10 from excise tax, the $10 should go towards funding 2 roads in the country, and the remainder will go to buying a cup of water. How do you balkanize revenue coming into the budget? Becomes a very difficult thing to do. So where the transparency is done, transparency is that every cent spent from oil money, from non-oil revenue, and from borrowing has to be appropriated by the National Assembly through a budgetary appropriation process, whether it is the original budget or through supplementary budgets, which then form part of an appropriations act or a supplementary appropriation act, which itemizes all of the expenditure of the state and how much is going to be spent. What we're spending the money for and the sum of money there in the budget law. And then that has to get parliamentary approval. So what we have done is we have ensured that every cent spent from oil money, non-oil money, borrowing, has to go through, be approved by the parliament. So that is it. But if you start detailing, okay, so because so that is when you start balkanizing revenue. If you, so all right, funds are fungible. So assuming we say the budget or all oil money will go to, we've increased in this year's budget, say $300 billion. 90 billion, so we'd say all oil money will go to fund only public service wages and salaries, 90 billion gone there. This year, we could say the budget for education grew from $53 billion to $135 billion. So that's about $80 billion more, $80 billion there. Another 80 for the increase in health sector expenditure. We're already, and the increase in pensions and the children grant, about 20 plus 10, 10, that's 30 billion. That's nearly the 300 billion. That's the 300 billion. Should we do that? And then the thing is that everything else, so the infrastructure is all coming from non-oil money, and from borrowing. The people just need to look at the growth in the budget. They say, oh, there's no oil, the oil money we're not getting back the oil money in spending. But who do you think is, how are we funding these scholarships alone? I didn't even put in the $230 billion that we're spending now on housing development. To do the 40,000 house lots now, it's $232 billion. We anticipate to get up to 50,000. We need another $50 billion next year. About $282 billion will go only to deliver on our promise of doing 50,000 house lots, because it costs about $5 million per house lot to develop a house lot. People think it's a whole deal of money. So when I hear about all of this money, that's $282 billion to just fulfill one promise. One promise. And you're talking about people not getting back money, and we only have $300 billion this year coming in from oil. Of course, the $282 billion is not for 1 year, it's for the 5 years. So why don't we have that conversation rather than the song bites? Oh, I hear Nigel saying $5 billion coming in from oil. He already counted next year money and everything else. Already counted next year's money. There has been no greater clarity surrounding oil resources in any country that I've seen than what we have done here. Let me show you how. In which you name a country that every 3 months, with it not, that every receipt of revenue, big or small, from an oil and gas company that is paid into the NRF has to by law be published in the official gazette, and Parliament has to be notified within 3 months of that receipt. Not annually, for every transaction. So if you get 100 payments in the course of a month, you got to publish all within the 3 months. Or if you don't, the minister goes to jail for 10 years. That was not there before 2020. Which country has that? You tell me which country that's producing oil and gas now has that. So that you, Chabral, could at the end of the day, a year, you take all the official gazettes and you just total down and you see the total sum of money we've received from oil and gas, from oil and gas revenue for the year. Which country has done that? That was not there in 2020 in the old law. We put that in place when we got into office. We put a formula in place where you saw the formula under Jordan. Oh, you had a fiscal committee, you had a macroeconomic committee, you had an investment committee, advisory committee, and all of that. And then ultimately the minister would decide how much money will come over from the NRF into the Treasury every year. What did we do? We put in a formula with a sliding scale. A child could apply the formula now. All you need to know is the sum of money in the NRF for the year, which you will know from public documents. You don't need to come to the government. And then on your computer or in your homes, you can just apply the formula. And even before Ashni Singh produces the budget next year, you will know how much money will come to the budget. Which country? You give me a country that has done that. There are tons of countries that have direct charges on their NRF. We remove all of that. But we can't satisfy. The issue is not transparency, is that the opposition shouts transparency, but really they don't want us to build the infrastructure. They don't want us to fix the gas, the electricity problem. Then they can complain about it at election time. They would say, don't go to build roads, too many roads, and then go to villages and complain, oh, your road isn't done as yet. They would say, oh, too many highways that we're building now, and then complain about too much traffic congestion on the road. That's what they don't want. It's not about transparency. It's never been about transparency. That's an excuse for their uselessness when they're in office. And so their whole thing about this big growth is fueled only by oil money. I just explained to you in about 5 areas alone that is annual budget: health, education, public servant wages and salaries, and pension, and the children grant. All of the oil money for this area is gone there. So how do you think we are fueling the growth? Is because of non-oil revenue and selective borrowing. But in spite of our borrowing, our stock of debt today is lower than when we took office in 1992. The stock of outstanding debt in nominal terms, not even in real terms, in nominal terms. So that is what they would like people to believe. But they lack creativity. They increase taxes by $90 billion a year more, and they didn't increase the capital budget in any of the years from 2014 to 2020, because building infrastructure was not a priority to them. But paying the ministers their 50% increase was a priority for them. So it has nothing to do with transparency. The next one is inflationary. So we keep a tight look at the real sector, how the real sector is growing. So the inflation is a combination of several things. It is on the fiscal side, too expansionary a fiscal policy or too loose monetary policy. And trust me, we are examining all of these variables. We believe that the resources that we are paying out through the cash grant could be accommodated in the macroeconomic framework without it being inflationary. And it is not a recurrent expenditure. So it doesn't mean next year that you have to pay out 60 billion more. If we're 60 billion to 600,000 people, that's what we estimated. So that is why we said, as the framework, as we get resources consistent with our macro plan and consistent with the long-term goals of the country, that there will be short-term interventions from time to time to get help to people directly. So that's how we have examined it. The shut-ins and the others, as I explained right at the beginning, even if we miss people now, they're not going to be excluded. We'd have to find some way of addressing the shut-ins. I also forgot to say to you that apart from the 5 regions we're working on, we are also registering public servants, public sector workers, and pensioners. So those 5 regions plus public servants and pensioners. We'll have to find a way, I guess, once the bulk of the people have been registered, to probably go and visit people to do the shut-ins. So we may have to have a program where we're notified where they are and just go at home and register people. I suspect we'll have to do that. But no one will be denied the 100,000. These are the, I think, 5 questions you asked. Yes, but all of them there. Some may come out to Georgetown and register. Some may be people there. If you miss them in the initial round, you will catch them probably in the second round in those areas.
All right.
Yes. You want to continue? But that is a question for someone who doesn't manage finances. And it is something like funds are fungible. So, all right, let me say, if I say all of it is coming from oil resources, what does that mean? What does that mean? Would it change the fact that the government of Ghana, in a macroeconomic framework, is giving $60 billion at least, because, well, depending on the numbers of people enumerated, but say $60 billion to the citizens of the country? So, what does it mean to the people of this country, whether they get it from oil money or non-oil revenue? They're getting it from a government that is building, transforming the country infrastructure-wise, modernizing the health sector, modernizing education sector, paying for people's scholarships, upgrading their communities, all the roads in their communities, the playgrounds in the country, investing heavily in sports, building power plants, creating more incentives for other type of infrastructure. So investing heavily in upgrade of security in the country, our ability to defend our natural resources, and at the same time giving them $60 billion in cash payments. In all within a framework, and whilst at the same time ensuring that our stock of debt is lower than 40 years ago. Because funds are fungible. It's the context, the context. So you understand it. So what sense does, all right, so next year, should we start saying oil money should only go to infrastructure and nothing else? We outlined in our manifesto, we said, here are the areas we will spend oil money in. The other parties did not do that. We did this before we came into office. We campaigned on that. It's in our manifesto. It's in our manifesto. We said invest in health care. Check the manifesto. We said invest in education. We said invest in infrastructure. We said save some for the future, which we're doing now. And also we said selective targeted cash grants. We remain true to our manifesto. So that is what it is not the key issue. I'm telling you the whole story about this opposition. It's an opposition thing. I see it all the time. They're shocked that we can actually change the country the way it's changing and still find the resources to make this massive payout to people, every citizen of the country, without increasing our foreign borrowing significantly. That is what, because when you put a Maipol or a Sherwin Holder, or that's his name, on low, right? To run things, they've never run large-scale complex tasks. We have had the experience of running large-scale complex tasks in a period when we did not have money. When we did not have money, when we were left with 100% of revenue going to service debt by APNU. And we managed to emerge out of that before we even found a drop of oil, because of careful fiscal monetary policies and because we were focused, we had a plan. We have a plan for every sector. They don't have a plan. So that is what shocks them so much. So they run around and say, oh, where they're getting the money from. it's oil money, they are awash with oil money. I just said to them, the 30% of the budget is oil money this year, only 30%. I went to the graduation activity for Nations University, and a lot of the students came to me afterwards. These are graduates with masters and so, and said, you know, we never knew that. We didn't know that only 30% of the budget, this year's budget, is funded from oil and gas resources. We had the impression that, oh, everything, practically. And so people need to be aware. We live in a world of anecdotes where a Mahipal kind of nonsense could become policy. In another country, they wouldn't even make it to the newspapers. Here, because news is so short, people just, you know, like you don't have much to write about during the course of the week. Very little happens. So you're just looking around for somebody to say something, even if it's nonsense. And then it suddenly gets a front page in Kaichor. Look at all the madness that Glenn Lyle says every week. You think they would have had a sanity test done for Glenn Lyle and the newspaper in another part of the world? Pure sanity test, you know, by now. Like this week he has, oh, Jagdeo would be lying at his news conference. Imagine, who does this sort of thing? I saw it somewhere here. Who does this sort of thing? It's like a media abuse on Rob Street. That's in his paper today. Today, Vice President Bharrat Jagdeo will be at it again. His presser is slated for 2 p.m. He's giving me publicity that I'm abusing him. If he's been abusing the people of this country with his stupidity and nonsense that he writes every day in his paper, and we have to tolerate it because we live in a country like that.
Good afternoon, Dr. Jagdeo, Short from Belgrave, Kaichor News. I just have 2 questions. One, you said recently that Guyana is in a better position to sell the 2 FPSOs that Exxon bought over in the event of an oil spill. And you also confirmed that it's going to be paid back via cost oil or recovery. Doesn't that make Guyana a part owner of these FPSO? And if that is the case, why should we sell our own assets to take care of an oil spill? And can you provide an update on the VHE audit report if it's finished and ready to be released publicly?
So the first question, it's a simple thing. You're not part owner of any company. You don't own these assets. So ExxonMobil puts in the investment. They create a company. The company has these assets. We're entitled to receive in the future 50% of once everything is paid off. Let's create a situation, a simple situation. Once all the debts, everything are paid off, which will come from cost oil, you're entitled to collect 50% of future profits, and they get 50%, and then 2% royalty on the gross. So let's say the gross, you'll have a difference between gross and net, but assuming say 52%. Let's simplify. 52 and they will get 48. Let's simplify. So I'm treating gross and net as the same. That's your entitlement to collect. You don't own the company. The company is owned by Exxon, Hess, and Sinopec. So assuming we got a company that you establish a company, Glenlal, and it's in the oil and gas sector, and he found all the money and invests in the company. And we are entitled to 50% and a 10% royalty in the future. Does that make us, and he buys an asset for the company, does that make us part owner of the company or the asset? It's a simple thing. Why do we have to keep explaining this all the time? We don't own 50% of the company. We have an entitlement as a state to 50% of their revenue. So that is why we don't have to supply any capital to invest. We don't supply as a country. We don't supply any capital. They have to find the capital, they have to raise the loans, and they have to invest. And then we have this entitlement. We don't own 50% of the company. Now, if you have a dissolution of the company now, because I'm simplifying, a dissolution of the company, and they sell off the assets, I guess we're entitled to 50% of the assets too, in the situation where you dissolve the company. So I hope that clarifies your question. Okay, it does. What was the second one? Oh, from what I gathered the last time I told you that they had finalized it. They finalized it, and by now I think they would have written to Exxon. I assume that to be so, because I did not check with the ministry recently, but the last update I had from Stacia, he said he had given the clearance, the PS was supposed to sign it, and then they had to get Exxon to comment on it.
Good day, Dr. Jagdeo. Cordell Jones from Livewire News. Now, in a recent statement on the PNCR's Facebook page, PNCR Member of Parliament Annette Ferguson recently described the current parliament as the worst parliament in post-independence Guyana. How do you respond to this characterization, particularly in light of the opposition's own conduct in the National Assembly over the years, including the actions during the 2020 elections and subsequent sittings?
People take Annette Ferguson seriously. I don't, so Annette Ferguson would say anything she wants. So I don't really take Annette Ferguson seriously. That's why I don't have much more to say. It's just like some people just come into my view, they're like a blip on the radar, and they exit like that too without me paying too much attention to what they say. There are lots of people like that. And it's not arrogance, it's just that you have a lot of craziness that they say in this country. I've been, the whole tenure of my press conference is dealing with people who say remarkably crazy things. And without anything to substantiate them. They just fill holes in the news cycle.
Could I ask you your thoughts on the recent incident in the Bahamian Parliament where multiple opposition members were ejected after one would have thrown the mace out of the parliamentary area there? And how do you see this contrasting with similar actions here in Guyana when it comes to the Guyanese opposition? And the last part, do you feel like the speaker or persons with the authority should probably implement such actions like we saw in the Bahamas recently?
I think there were some disciplinary action that were instituted, and it went through. I think our speaker is a little more accommodating And in Guyana's case, I think the matter went to the Committee of Privileges, and there was a deliberation there, and that and they agreed on some disciplinary action, which was then instituted. So I agree with that. And this the routine stuff we see in our parliament. What might be an unusual thing for the Bahamas? Like, we see it routinely in our parliament. You know, the distortion of facts without any consequences. We saw Patterson said, stand up on the floor and lied about their Myla fall and said the power was coming in at 30 cents per kilowatt hour without any censorship. He should have been censored for lying to the parliament. He did this openly. And so if we allow people to get away with these things, after a time they become normalized. And that's why I've almost just moved on mentally from what they say in the parliament.
Ryan, Evening News. You mentioned that public servants are still currently being registered. This current set, will they still be getting a grant by this year end? And I have two other questions.
Yeah, I anticipate that the people in the public sector, we're aiming to complete the public sector workers and the pensioners before the end of the year too.
Okay. My other questions, the GMSA had recently expressed concern about the Trinidad port workers, the strike action, and the effects it could have on business in Guyana, and they'd also call on the Guyana government to take measures and, if possible, intervene. Is it something that the government is looking at?
I'm doing the feature address tonight at the GMSA dinner, so I guess I'll address this issue too. But there is very little we can do to intervene in an industrial dispute in another country between the workers of that country and their government or the port authorities. We are open to ideas working with the private sector to get their goods out of Trinidad and Tobago. And we hope that with the long-term investments that are being made now to expand port facilities here, soon the facility at Vredenhoop will be open not just for oil and gas activities, but could allow greater movement of containers into the country. And with the bridge being completed, that would allow containers to be landed on the west side and then come across to Region 4, Region 5, Region 6, which has always been a constraint, the weight restrictions on the floating bridge. That would help enormously. It may not solve all the problems because ultimately we do need a deep water harbor, but the cost of the deep water harbor is prohibitive at this stage, because if it is not a government investor and you have to have a private investor do this is where we have had difficulties. They would need a stream of revenue that would be significant enough to amortize that sort of investment. So all the discussions we've had over the years have almost discounted the deepwater harbor being done close to the coast because of the cost of dredging. The dredging cost is enormous and it would be continuous and can be prohibitive. And so the new ideas that are being developed now, and I suspect this will have to await the next term of the PPP government, but we'll still continue over the course of the next year to explore it, will be to go out into the Atlantic, build through a causeway into the Atlantic, maybe about 6-7 kilometers out, so that you can get to deep water. And this is done in other places, so that the largest ships in the world can come there. And then you can build a facility that would allow us to bypass our cargo having to go to Jamaica or Trinidad and Tobago, to be then placed on smaller vessels and transshipped to Guyana. They can come directly to Guyana. We can then become a hub for regional trade, for goods coming to Guyana and then being transshipped from here back into the islands and to Suriname, and some going into northern Brazil. So that's the concept we're working on now. It's a concept, but when you look at the cost of doing that, it's significant. It could range between $1 to $2 billion, depending on the scope of the project, because you'd have to also link the road to Brazil and possibly a rail to move the cargo in. That will give you a sufficient revenue stream so that when you do the feasibility study, then it would show a fairly decent internal rate of return that would allow it to be an attractive investment to the investor. The other thing being explored is maybe the government offsetting some of the risk by co-investing in some of these facilities, because ultimately we have to have a deep water facility. We have to have a deep water facility to bypass all of these arrangements. So the dredging cost is something that is very prohibitive. You have to avoid that in the future. Although we will support some dredging, because their aim is to up to the MUF from where the gas to energy project is going. We will probably have to export some of the LPG that we have there. Remember, we had moved from an importer of cooking gas to an exporter of cooking gas, because our demand, we'll be producing more than we can utilize in the country. So we'll need to export some of those, and most of it mainly through vessels. So that means the vessels may have to go up the river to all the way to a point close to where the power plant is, and the LPG, the NGL facility will be to load the gas there for export. So we may have to do some dredging along the Demerara River, and that could help to develop all the lands on the west side of the river, because on the east side of the river already the land is very expensive and most of it is taken. So it's a major plan that we have, but these are not decisions that are made. If it was the AFC or the others, they would make all kinds of decisions like this. These have to be done based on numbers and what's good for the country. So we go through several iterations of these projects, and we are looking to get them done, but in a configuration that best serves the interests of our country and our people without burdening the treasury too much.
And is the government currently looking at reforms, legislative or otherwise, to the auto insurance industry? I know mention was made of plans last year, but we haven't heard much since.
Yeah, clearly we'd have to upgrade, like with everything else. I want to talk a bit tonight, maybe at the GMSA activity, about retooling basically the economy and creating a framework for the growth of people, but more so since it would be the GMSA for their constituents. And all of the changes that are being made to create a more enabling environment that often slip past many people. They don't notice the changes, but the changes are very profound. So if you look, for example, at the Condominium Act, that act in itself would allow a massive growth of what's already happening, people building condos for sale. And this is all an opportunity that grew out of the local content law when we prohibited the oil and gas companies from renting from foreigners. They have to rent from locals. So just that example. Then, for example, the Data Privacy Act, how that could help with a whole range of development of a whole range of services that are needed in the country, but where they have to be regulated for privacy purposes and protection of the citizens. So too with the insurance sector. That has to be upgraded significantly. So the depth of the sector, the insurance industry in Guyana, is like with our banking system. It cannot, I should say that they're still too shallow. The financial sector has grown significantly, but when you look at its asset base, it cannot service a $22 billion economy the way in a manner that would be permissive of its rapid growth. They don't have the assets and they don't have the instruments, because many of the instruments are dated and not modern enough. The world has moved light years beyond some of the instruments still used as investment vehicles in these sectors. So at some stage, they have the possibility of reinsuring and all of that, like in the insurance sector. But we still have to push to expand the framework and modernize the sector. People complain all the time, for example, about vehicles. If you get into an accident, now the compensation is very small. But if we raise the compensation level, they would raise premium for every person who gets an insurance on the road. So sometimes these things have unintended consequences. But you do have to explore them as the economy gets larger, but you have to pace yourselves. So I anticipate that insurance sector legislation. Like for example, I think we've tabled a piece of legislation that would make it easier for the banks to use movable collateral. So then people can get loans now on something that is movable, a vehicle, etc. They can use it to collateralize a loan. So they can maybe take small loans out on their vehicles, etc. In the past, the banks would insist on fixed assets. So it's that sort of growth that will happen in the future.
Naomi for the Chronicle. I'd like to turn your attention back to politics a little bit. The WPA has said that a grand coalition is being explored. Given all that you've said and the history of the APNU AFC, do you believe such a coalition would make a difference for those parties?
Yeah. I don't want to sound arrogant, but 0 plus 0 is still 0. The thing is that I saw AFC having a discussion with GAP. Now, you have GAP. I don't know how many people they got GAP. Remember the last time they had GAP? LPG or what? LPG or LGP? Or I don't know what one. Sharma Party, right? LGP or something like that. I don't even remember the names. Sharma had a party. Tabita formed a party. WPA, a zero party. All of them were part of this grand coalition. They were all there. AFC, APNU, right? That was a grand coalition. It didn't matter at that time. So they can explore day and night what they want. The AFC, the WPA, it doesn't change their nature. People will remember them. With what did David Hines do for people in Buxton? He likes to talk about Buxton. In the 5 years that APNU was there, how many jobs did they generate for the people there? Part-time or otherwise? How many roads did he get fixed in Buxton or any other part of the country? What did he say when they took away the cash grant? Nigel Hughes just said it was good that they took away the cash grant from the children because it was necessary for fiscal reasons. You remember that? What did they say? What did he say when they took away the free water from the pensioners? So he could hide as much as he wants from their track record. We remind the people of this country. Why do you think I come here every week? Because I want people to remember what they did. They all the time, they want to run from the past. Cathy Hughes, now they want you to ask more than 4 years back. So only ask about the PPP period in office. Don't ask about us in office. That's what Cathy Hughes is saying. So David Hines, and he got upset. I don't know who asked him about this, about their membership. The 3+1, I think, they got a 3+1 membership, yeah. He got worked up about it. But whoever asked him did a good job. That's what we need. They're probing these parties. Every week we withstand the probing. I've been asked questions on everything under the sun. Everything. We withstand the probing. On complex issue all the time, we got to answer about corruption. We got to answer about everything under the sun. And I know we are a big party, so that people treat us seriously. But the others can't continue to lie. They're like ticks on the backs of the people.
Good afternoon, sir. Luan Williams, DPI. So recently, the Field Museum of Chicago conducted a study in the Arakai-Corentyne corridor, and they found some interesting things. 20 new species to Guyana, 23 possibly to science. Sir, how is this discovery significant to Guyana's environmental and economic future?
So I did not get to go at the presentation. I was supposed to be there. But it's something consistent with what we've been saying, that we're a part of the world that is teeming with biodiversity, that you have some of the highest concentration of biodiversity in the world, in our country. And it's also consistent with the move by the government of Guyana to enhance protection of biodiversity along the lines of our expanded LCDS, It's one of the 5 new pillars of the LCDS. And to ensure that there is global recognition and protection for biodiversity, and also funds to support their preservation. So the fact that they had this finding, it's not unusual that if you do research in these areas, you will find that new species or a large amount of biodiversity in very geographically limited areas. And we're one of the few countries in the world where we can say that we have parts of our territory that have been unexplored as yet. And we've kept them in a pristine environment or state almost back to when, like thousands of years, going back to thousands of years. When you compare that to a lot of the developed world, like in the UK, I think they only have 2% of their original forests. So they've cut down 98% of their forests, original forests, and planted. You have some new forests, but only 2% of their original forests. Most of our forests is the original forest, been there for hundreds of years, maybe going back to thousands of years. So we are fortunate to live in this country, and that's why we are hoping that through the project that we want to do, the zoo and the botanical garden, that we can raise awareness of the wealth of our country in terms of biodiversity among all of our children, including those who live in the coastal areas. So for me, that is a huge that will be a huge teaching facility there in the botanical gardens for the children across this country to be able to firsthand come in contact with their future, because it's up to them to first of all recognize what we have and then keep it intact. And that's why we're paying great attention to that project. Yes.
Dr. Jagdeo, Michael Rodriguez for TBN. Is your government totally oblivious to the surreptitious geopolitical movements? Pre-2015 election, they had Vote Like a Boss. There were a lot of organizations created to create an atmosphere of legitimacy. Recently, the PDC, Project Development Consultancy, was going around claiming to doing a survey and giving the impression that it was on behalf of the government. More things like this are popping up coming closer to election. Given the true nature of world powers, supremacy based on resources that are garnered from other countries. This was seen with the French in Africa, and world powers in general using other countries' resources to build themselves. Given the importance of oil to Exxon and the importance of Exxon and oil to America, is the government cognizant, given the fact that Nigel Hughes is unwilling to look or recuse himself from being associated with Exxon? Does your government see any surreptitious activity as it relates to the geopolitics in this country? And are you aware of any such, or are on the lookout for such?
So as the General Secretary of the PPP, I'm painfully aware of the reality of what you've just mentioned. I witnessed it in the past, how these attempts to subvert electoral processes can be supported by several agencies. And therefore, we are very vigilant as to any such effort in the future. This is why the government of Guyana immediately issued a press release condemning and the attempts by some of the enumerators from this consultancy who were creating the impression they were acting on behalf of the government to solicit information from people. And I did so again earlier today in my press conference, pointing out to people that they are under no obligation to participate in any survey. Now, as we get closer to elections, you're going to have a number of people and organizations who will want to come in under the guise of voters' education. The Vote Like a Boss campaign was done under the guise of voters' education, but it morphed into a mobilization tool for the opposition at that time. So it was focused only in some areas, as though voters' education should not be done in the hinterland or rural communities. They focused mainly in Georgetown and New Amsterdam, and actually helped some of the characters who were involved with this voters' education. They were openly activists of the opposition at that time, and were known anti-PPP individuals. So I've seen of recent some attempts once again to come back under the guise of voters' education to influence people. We've made it clear from the government that GECOM is responsible for voters' education. GECOM should educate the voters of this country as to their rights and obligations. And the manual that is required by law now, that they have to, by law now, produce before, several months before the elections and make public, that should be the basis on which voters' education is done, so that people are aware of what they have, their rights and responsibilities. So the manual will say, for example, a presiding officer cannot stop you from voting because you don't have an ID card or a passport. Cannot stop you from voting. They have to administer, once your name is on the list, you have the option of taking an oath and then being allowed to vote. And why is this so? Because of the Esther Pereira case. That matter went to court, was argued, and the court found that to prevent a voter from voting because of the absence of an ID card was illegal, unconstitutional. That's the law of Guyana. So all their talk about biometrics and everything else, if you go into a polling place and once your name is on the voters list, you're there and you're identified to vote. They can't stop you from voting. But you have to present yourself physically. That is why people who register and abroad, they can't vote from abroad. But you have to present yourself. So if, for example, the presiding officer now says, those documents you have there, you have to put in the box, like what Mingo said on the East Coast, the night of the election. Not put in the box. You have to keep those. You can't put them in the box because the instruction, all of the following documents have to go along with the ballot, counted ballot, and the statements of poll in the box with these official documents. If Mingo changed the instruction, now that would be in black and white and available to everyone. So the polling agents of the party will say, hold on a minute, you can't tell us that now. This is what the manual says. So the manual will be detailed long before the elections. That is what needs to be popularized. Not people to go, some group coming in from abroad and linking up with some of these UPNU supporters and then disguise it under an NGO and say they're going to work on turnout. In the United States, we have higher turnout than in Europe and in the US. They don't need to work on our turnout. We have good voters turnout here. But they come in a very condescending way. So I've seen already that some of the usual suspects, like the Red Thread, you know the Red Thread was the women's arm of the WPA. They're now considered an NGO, but they're hostile to the PPP. Never in the years of their existence, never a single word of support for any initiative we have done. They've always been hostile. They're suddenly part of an NGO group and they're vying for grants now to do voters' education. The GHRA, another hostile to the government entity, is trying to do voters' education again. But they're all pro-PNC. And sometimes they're being considered. So I hope that no NGO or international organization will come and tell us that they're going to give grants to these bodies to do voters' education and then have them run amok in the country. We'll oppose it as the People's Progressive Party. We'll oppose it because we know of the way they've done this. We have been a victim of this already. We're not going to allow it to happen. When GECOM needs to not accredit any of those people who have had partisan interests to be part of any voters' education program that may be offered to them. We don't have a problem if GECOM does this itself. But we ain't going to be opposed to that. So we're watching this.
Dr. Jagdeo, secondly,
Intishira brought to my attention that one group that was hired by the European Union to do some form of voters' education or support here was including some of these organizations, but couldn't, they left out the Hindu community, the Muslim community, they left out the NTC, but they were focused on only selective sections of the Christian community they had. And she pointed this out to me. I saw a note that came across my WhatsApp recently from her, that they're very selective in who they pick. And some of the usual suspects are already there. So it's very good that you brought it up, because she has been taking a strong view on these matters. We're not going to be lured into this sort of thing because they're offering $700,000 or $50,000 here.
Taking a serious view, Dr. Jagdeo, have your party or Mr. Shearer expressed concerns to the
Yes,
Europeans?
She has expressed, with my full support as General Secretary of the party.
Dr. Jagdeo, recently there has been attempts to bring disrepute, not to say it hasn't happened in the past, to GECOM's chairman. No such attempts suggesting that Asha Kissoon from TNM is sitting illegally in Parliament, which is obviously not so. But no such attempts, and the zest to create that atmosphere was not when 30-odd members of Parliament sat in Parliament for 5 months. And actually 2 years, 5 months. Nobody spoke about that. Nobody reached out to GECOM to ask them what was going on. You know, they weren't so vocal. Your take on that and the Asha Kissoon.
Exactly. Now this is a good point. I even forgot about it. Sometimes we don't even raise this issue. So if you lost the elections on March 2nd, but they remain as ministers until ministers, president, prime minister until August 2nd. 5 months you collected salaries illegally. All the perks of government were illegal. What happened to those people? Should they pay back their money that they received in that period? Shouldn't they pay back the money that they received because they were squatting in these positions? They spent billions of dollars in that period. Should they be paying back the money? And so it's a good point that you're making. There was no outrage at that time. Nigel Hughes didn't come up and speak about it because Cathy Hughes was a beneficiary of the policy. In fact, Patterson was saying at the same time that they had their SOP showing they won. So this is what I talk about. I started today about duplicity, double standards, the lies that they tell. If anything, I will every single week, and I'm going to stop. In fact, I'm going to increase the frequency of it. So Glenlal, watch out, I come up more often now to talk about the lies. I'm going to remind everybody about what took place in that period, because the same crooks from that era, they're trying to reinvent themselves and they don't want to withstand scrutiny, like Cathy Hughes is saying. Don't ask us about them. Thank you.